Two friends buy a car in the same week. The first one is proud. He saved for years and paid cash. No payments, no interest, nothing owed to anyone. Everybody tells him he did it the smart way. The second friend borrows, but not for the car. He takes that same pile of cash, puts it down on a small rental property, and lets the bank lend him the rest. 10 years later, the first friend has a car worth almost nothing, and the exact same paycheck he's always had. The second friend somehow owns that same car too. But it's the least interesting thing about him now, because that one borrowed decision quietly grew into a small fortune. You've been told your whole life that debt is a trap, and for most people it absolutely is. It drains them, silently, for decades. But the wealthy borrow more money than almost anyone alive, constantly, on purpose, and it tends to leave them richer every single year, not poorer. Same tool, opposite result. By the end of this, you'll see the one distinction that flips debt from the thing that owns you into the thing that sets you free. And it starts with a fact almost nobody is ever taught. There are two kinds of debt that look completely identical and do the exact opposite to your life. The first kind, you already know by heart. You borrow to buy something that loses value the second it's yours, a car that's worth less the moment you drive it off the lot, a phone that's outdated in a year, a vacation that's gone by Monday, a couch, clothes, a dinner you put on a card. The pattern never changes, the thing decays, the interest grows, and you, the borrower, are the one feeding it, month after month for years. The money only ever flows one direction, out of your pocket and into the lender's. There's a dead simple way to spot this kind of debt. Ask one question about anything you borrow for. After I buy this, does money come toward me or away from me? With consumer debt, it's always away. You bought a liability, something that reaches into your pocket every month and takes. And that's the debt that quietly runs most people's entire lives. But watch what the wealthy do with that same loan, the same interest rate, the same bank. They just point it the other way. They borrow to buy things that pay them, an apartment that collects rent, a business that throws off profit every month, a truck or a machine that earns more than it costs to run. Inventory bought for $10 and sold for $20. And the logic underneath it is almost insultingly simple. If you can borrow money at 6% and the thing you buy with it earns 10, that 4-point gap is yours to keep. And the money that earned it was never even yours. It belonged to the bank. You just rented it, aimed it at something productive, and pocketed the difference. That's the secret the textbooks bury under 100 boring pages. You can build real wealth on other people's money as long as what you buy with it earns more than the loan costs you. The rich aren't playing with bigger piles of their own cash. They're renting everyone else's and keeping the spread. Take the simplest version. A small shop owner borrows $50,000 to fill her shelves with inventory. She sells that stock for $80,000. The loan cost her a few thousand in interest and put nearly $30,000 in profit in her pocket, on money she never had to begin with. The bank was thrilled to lend it, because lending is how the bank itself makes money. Everybody in that chain got richer by borrowing. That's productive debt. It doesn't feed on you. It feeds you. And here's where it tips into something that feels almost unfair. It's called leverage, and it's the engine humming under nearly every large fortune you can name. Picture a $500,000 building. You don't put down $500,000. You put down $100,000, and the bank covers the other $400,000. Now the building rises 10% in a year. That's $50,000. But you only put in $100,000 of your own. So your real return isn't 10%. It's 50. The loan didn't just help you buy the thing. It multiplied the return on every single dollar you actually risked. But here's the half they leave off the brochure. Leverage multiplies in both directions. If that same building drops 10% instead of rising, you don't lose 10%. You lose 50% of your money. And the bank still wants every payment, on time, whether the building went up, down, or nowhere at all. The very force that can make you rich fast can wipe you out just as fast. Leverage doesn't take sides. Remember that. We're coming back to it. So who's actually making the payments on that building? Here's the part that should make you sit up straight. Not you. The tenant is. Their rent covers the mortgage every month. So you control a $500,000 asset, it climbs in value while you sleep, and a stranger pays it off for you. You put up a sliver of cash, rented the bank's money, and bought something that quietly pays for itself. And then there's a second force working in your favor. One the consumer borrower never ever gets. Inflation. When you owe a fixed loan, that number is frozen. It never grows. But the dollars themselves shrink a little every year. So the rent goes up, the building's price goes up, your income goes up, and the debt just sits there, stuck in yesterday's money. 20 years on, a mortgage that once felt enormous feels almost like pocket change. Because you're paying it back with dollars worth far less than the ones you first borrowed. Inflation, the same quiet thief that robs the saver, hands money straight to the borrower who owns the right kind of debt. Now here's where it compounds into something serious, because the wealthy don't stop at one. Once that first building has gained enough value, they borrow against the new equity, pulling cash back out without selling, without triggering a tax bill, and use it as the down payment on the next one. Then they do it again. One asset becomes the seed for the next, and the next. They're not saving up for 30 years to buy building number 2. They're letting building number 1 give birth to it. That's how a single smart loan, recycled with discipline, quietly becomes 10. But this is exactly where the danger lives, and where most people who try this get destroyed. Because leverage is not a trick, it's a discipline. Picture two people who both borrow to invest. The first buys a flashy property in a red-hot area, betting the price keeps climbing. It doesn't cover its own costs. The rent doesn't even match the loan, but he's certain he'll sell higher later. The second buys a boring little set of units in an ordinary neighborhood that pays him more in rent than the mortgage costs from the very first month. Then a downturn hits. The first guy can't make his payments, can't sell into a falling market, and loses everything. The second guy barely notices. His tenants still pay, his loan's still covered, and while everyone else panics, he's out shopping for the next deal at a discount. The amateur borrowed hoping the price would go up. The professional borrowed knowing the asset already paid its own way. That single difference is the entire line between leverage and ruin. So what does any of this look like for someone who isn't buying buildings yet? The same question, just scaled down. A loan for tools or equipment that earns you more than the payment, that's good debt. Borrowing to start something that produces income, potentially good debt. Even a mortgage on a home where you rent out a spare room flips part of it productive. Student debt only counts as good if the degree reliably lifts your income by more than it cost you. The label was never really about the loan. It was always about what the loan went out and bought, and it runs all the way to the very top. The richest people you can name often take almost no salary at all, because a salary gets taxed hard. Instead, they borrow against the mountain of assets they already own. A loan isn't income, so it isn't taxed, and those assets keep climbing along behind it while they live off the borrowed cash. Exactly how that game is played at the billionaire level is its own rabbit hole, a story for another day. But the principle is the same one you just watched with that building. Control the asset, borrow against it, and never stop it from growing. So here's the reframe that changes everything. Debt was never good, and it was never bad. It's a lever. And a lever doesn't care what you attach it to. It simply multiplies whatever force you put on the end of it. Hook it to things that drain you, and it drains you faster than you can earn. Hook it to things that pay you, and it builds you faster than any paycheck ever could. Which means the question was never, should I avoid debt? The real question, the one the wealthy quietly ask before they sign anything, is just this. Is this loan buying me something that pays me, or something I pay for? Is it buying me an asset, or slowly turning me into one? Now think back to those two friends and their cars. One paid cash, owed nothing, and stood exactly where he started a decade later. The other borrowed, owed plenty, and that debt went to work and bought him a life. They both used money. Only one of them ever made money obey. Answer that one question honestly. Every single time you borrow and you stop being the person debt happens to, you become the person who uses it.